The nicest person you know is lying to you, not with words, with behavior. Every unwanted favor, every swallowed opinion, every "it's fine" when it is not fine, not even close, these cost something, and someone is always paying. You call it kindness. It is closer to a transaction, and you have been financing it for years without ever reading the terms. You think you are being generous. You are actually being afraid and calling it a personality. Afraid of what happens if you say the true thing instead of the easy one. Afraid of the silence after a no. You don't believe you'd survive their disapproval, so you never test it. And the people around you can feel the difference, even when they can't name it. Especially when they can't name it. You are not as harmless as you think. You are not as kind as you think either. Because there is a version of nice that is not virtue at all. It doesn't come from love. It comes from a calculation you made so long ago you forgot you were making it, that being liked was safer than being real, and that shrinking yourself was cheaper than testing what would happen if you didn't. Think of every time you rewrote a text message 3 times so it wouldn't sound too blunt. Every time you laughed at something that wasn't funny because the room needed you to. Every time you said, "no worries," while something, somewhere in you, was absolutely worried. None of that was politeness. That was a small, constant negotiation for safety, paid in pieces of yourself. And the terrifying part isn't that you've been doing this for years. The terrifying part is how good you've gotten at not noticing. You did this yesterday. You'll do it again tomorrow. At work, when you agreed to take on a project that wasn't yours, because saying no felt like a bigger risk than burning out quietly. At home, when you let a comment slide that actually hurt, because naming it out loud felt like more trouble than it was worth. In your own head, right now, if you're honest, you already know exactly which relationship this video is really about. You have been running that calculation on autopilot for years. Today, we turn the autopilot off. Picture the last time you said yes when your whole body screamed no. The tight jaw, the smile that didn't reach your eyes, the apology you added to a sentence that never needed one. That wasn't generosity, that was surrender, executed so smoothly you nearly convinced yourself it was a choice. This is the architecture of the chronically nice, an entire identity built around being the safe one, the easy one, the one who never causes a scene, and then quiet fury when nobody rewards it. You gave and gave, certain the debt would eventually come due in your favor. It didn't. People don't repay what they were never asked to earn. Here's the part that stings. People don't respect what costs nothing. Your yes cost nothing, because you hand it out like a reflex you never chose. Your boundaries are decoration, not walls. Your opinions evaporate the moment someone's face changes. You have spent years trading your spine for approval, and what came back wasn't love. It was invisibility. You are not underappreciated. You are unthreatening, and nothing unthreatening has ever been wanted, chosen, or feared. Somewhere underneath the politeness is a colder truth. It was never really about them. It was about managing your own terror of rejection, dressed up as generosity so it would hurt less to name. A shield mistaken for a gift. And the exhaustion you carry, the low hum of resentment you can't quite name, that's the bill arriving. Every year, on time. Watch closely and the pattern repeats everywhere it's allowed to. In the friendship where you always drive, always plan, always adjust, and are never once asked what you'd prefer. Same trap, different room. In the job where you absorb the work nobody else will touch and call it being a team player, when really it's the only language you know for being seen at all. You tell yourself this is temporary, that once people see how reliable you are, how easy, how undemanding, they'll finally reciprocate on their own, without you ever having to ask. This is the great myth of the nice person, that invisibility is a phase, not a destination. It isn't. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to start noticing someone they've never had to notice before. The role you accepted, whether you meant to or not, is the role you'll keep playing until you refuse it out loud. Look further back and you'll find the blueprint. Maybe it was a household where anger was dangerous, so you became the peacekeeper before you were old enough to know what peace cost. Maybe it was a parent whose moods you learned to read and manage before you learned to read a clock. Maybe it was simpler than that. A single moment where wanting something loudly got you punished and quietly getting it got you praised. Children are fast learners. You learn the lesson once, and then you spent the next 20 years generalizing it to every relationship you've ever had, including the ones with people who never once threatened you the way that first person did. You didn't choose this pattern in a vacuum. Somewhere early, you learned that wanting things, speaking up, taking up space made you a burden. So you optimized for the opposite. You became frictionless. And frictionless people don't get loved. They get extracted from, quietly, by people who never had to work for anything from you in the first place. This doesn't stay in your head. It moves into your body eventually. The tight shoulders you've decided are just how you carry stress. The jaw you clench in your sleep. The way your stomach knots before a phone call you know is going to require you to disappoint someone. That's not a personality trait. That's a nervous system running a threat simulation every time honesty becomes a possibility. Because somewhere along the way, honesty actually was a threat, and your body never got the memo that it stopped being one. Here's the part your therapist never told you, because it isn't flattering and it doesn't fit the victim narrative you've been renting out for years. Your niceness is not just self-protection. It is also a method of control. One so covert you've deployed it 1,000 times without ever calling it by its real name. Every time you say, "It's fine," through gritted teeth, you are not being honest. You are planting a debt the other person doesn't know they owe. You'll collect on it later, in resentment, in a sudden coldness they can't explain, in the silent treatment you call needing space. That is not generosity. That is a delayed invoice. Your niceness isn't submission either. It's a claim to the high ground. As long as you're the one who never causes problems, you get to be the one everyone else looks bad standing next to. You don't need to raise your voice to win an argument. You just need to be hurt by it, visibly, and let their guilt do the rest of the work for you. This is leverage. It doesn't look like leverage because it wears a soft face, but ask yourself, coldly, how many times has your disappointment rearranged someone else's behavior without you ever stating what you wanted out loud? How many times has a room gone quiet, careful, apologetic, because you looked wounded instead of saying the sentence? You have trained the people around you to handle you delicately because your hurt feelings are the one form of power you never had to be brave to use. That is not weakness. That is influence, purchased on credit, and somebody is always making the payments. Consider the running tally you keep, even if you'd never admit to keeping one. The birthday you remembered that they forgot. The favor you did without being asked that they never reciprocated. You don't bring these up directly. That would require confrontation, and confrontation is a currency you never learn to spend. Instead, you let the tally accumulate, silently, until it calcifies into a grievance so old, neither of you can trace its origin anymore. That tally is a ledger, and ledgers are tools of control. You are not keeping score because you're generous. You are keeping score because somewhere you expect to collect. This plays out differently depending on where you deploy it. At work, it looks like being the reliable one who never pushes back, until the resentment leaks out as subtle sabotage, a slow-walked project, an email seed to the wrong person on purpose. In romance, it looks like never voicing a complaint until the relationship ends abruptly, blindsiding a partner who had no idea anything was wrong because you'd spent months curating the appearance that everything was fine. With family, it looks like the dutiful child who shows up to everything and says yes to everything, banking invisible credit that gets cashed in decades later as guilt, as obligation, as the unspoken rule that everyone owes you for your years of sacrifice. Different rooms, same operation. And here is the cruelest twist in the entire mechanism. It doesn't even work in your favor long term. Covert control built on withheld truth doesn't earn you closeness. It earns you people who feel managed without knowing why, who slowly, instinctively pull back from you without being able to say what's wrong. You wanted intimacy. What you built instead was a series of relationships where everyone is performing for everyone else, and nobody, including you, has any idea what would happen if the performance ever stopped. There's a specific move worth naming on its own because it's the most invisible one. The sigh instead of the sentence. The long exhale when someone asks what's wrong. The "it's whatever" that clearly isn't whatever. You've learned that discomfort, performed just slightly, gets other people to do the emotional labor of guessing what you need. So you never have to risk stating it and being told no. That's not shyness. That's outsourcing the request while keeping your hands clean of ever having made one. This is the part that will be hardest to hear. The people who call you too nice are often the ones who have learned, the hard way, that your niceness comes with terms and conditions. Cross you, and the warmth disappears without explanation. Disagree with you, and you go quiet in a way that punishes more effectively than shouting ever could. You built a system where kindness is conditional, and the condition is never spoken aloud, because the moment you say it out loud, it stops working. Covert control only functions in silence. The instant you name the mechanism breaks. That is exactly what's happening right now in this sentence. So sit with the discomfort of this. You have not only been a victim of your own fear, you have also, in smaller and larger ways, been running an operation. And the first step out of it is admitting the operation exists. There's a reason all of this feels uncomfortably familiar the moment it's said out loud. You've suspected it for years, in the part of you that gets exhausted after being agreeable, in the part that resents people you were never honest with. Carl Jung had a name for the version of you that you murdered in order to become likable. He called it the shadow. Everything ambitious, angry, sexual, dominant, and dangerous that you were taught to suppress the moment it made someone else uncomfortable. Yours is still alive. It didn't die. It just went underground and runs your life from there, leaking out as passive aggression you call venting, as resentment with no clear source, as the disproportionate rage you feel when someone you help for free asks for one more thing. You didn't destroy that part of yourself, you rerouted it, and it's been driving from the back seat ever since. Jung had another name for the opposite of the shadow, the persona, the mask you present to the world, curated and agreeable and safe. Most people believe the persona is who they are, and the shadow is some foreign invader to be exorcised. Jung believed the opposite. He believed a person who never integrates their shadow doesn't become good. They become brittle and thin and quietly resentful of everyone who gets to be whole. You have spent your life polishing the mask while the actual engine of who you are sits untouched in the dark, getting angrier every year at how little it's been allowed to speak. This is why integration terrifies people more than repression ever did. Repression is familiar. It's the water you've swum in your whole life. Integration means admitting the drowning was never actually keeping you safe. It was just quiet enough that you mistook it for safety. Jung's entire argument was that psychological wholeness requires embracing the parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable, not exiling them to a basement and hoping they stay quiet forever. They don't stay quiet. They never have. They just wait. Here's the part that won't feel good. The nice guy, the nice girl, is not the opposite of the dangerous person. They're built from the same raw material, minus the courage to use it. The capacity for dominance is still in you. The edge is still in you. What's missing is the willingness to own it in daylight instead of letting it run the basement shift. Nietzsche called this dynamic something colder, slave morality. He didn't see conventional niceness as virtue at all. He saw it as a system built by the powerless engineered to shame the powerful into standing down. Be harmless, the culture whispers, and you'll be accepted. But acceptance was never the same currency as respect. It only ever bought you a smaller room to live in, and you've been paying rent on that room for years. And here's the part Nietzsche was almost gleeful about. The people who benefit most from your harmlessness are rarely grateful for it. They simply expect it, the way you expect gravity. Harmlessness becomes the baseline, and baselines are invisible. Nobody thanks the floor for holding them up. They only notice it the day it isn't there. The Stoics would tell you something almost identical, stripped of the cynicism. Virtue was never the absence of power. It was power disciplined on purpose. There's a universe of difference between a man who's harmless because he could dismantle the room and doesn't, and a man who's harmless because harmlessness is the only setting he's ever been allowed to use. You are, right now, the second man. Not because you lack the capacity for the first kind of man, the one who chooses restraint from strength. You lack the practice. Capacity and practice are not the same thing, and the gap between them is exactly what the rest of this video is going to close. You've known that your whole life. That's the ache underneath the politeness, the thing that niceness has been quietly covering for since before you had language for it. The goal isn't to become cruel. Cruelty is cowardice wearing a louder mask. The goal is integration, taking the shadow out of the basement and putting it to work in daylight instead. This isn't about becoming someone harsher or someone your friends won't recognize in 6 months. It's about closing the gap between what you feel and what you say, a gap you've been widening since childhood without ever deciding to. The wider that gap gets, the more it costs you, in exhaustion, in relationships built on a version of you that was never real, in decades spent liked by people who never actually knew you. Closing it starts with 3 specific, unglamorous actions. No more theory. 3 moves, and you start today. First, replace every automatic yes with 24 hours of silence. The chronically nice say yes instantly because the discomfort of someone else's disappointment is unbearable to sit with for even a second. Break that reflex on purpose. When someone asks something of you, say only this: "Let me think about it," and nothing else. No justification stapled to the end of it, no smile to soften the pause. Then sit in the discomfort of the silence and let it be uncomfortable. You are not being rude. You are proving to your own nervous system, for the first time in years, that a pause will not end the relationship and will not end you. Notice what comes up in that 24 hours. Usually it isn't clarity, it's dread, a looping anxiety about what they'll think, whether they'll be disappointed, whether this is the moment they finally decide you're not worth the trouble. Let the dread run its course without feeding it a yes. Most of the time, the disaster you're bracing for never arrives. The person waits. The world does not end. And you learn in your body, not just your head, that you were never actually in danger. You were just unpracticed at tolerating someone else's mild inconvenience. Second, say one true, mildly uncomfortable thing every single day. Not cruelty, not oversharing for effect. One honest opinion you'd normally swallow before it reaches your mouth. I disagree. I don't want to. That doesn't work for me. Small, deliberate doses, administered on purpose. This is exposure therapy for a voice you amputated years ago. Most people who call themselves nice haven't spent their own voice on another human being in years, and they call the resulting silence peace, when it's actually a slow erasure of the self, one swallowed sentence at a time. Practice it somewhere low stakes first if you have to, correcting a barista's order, telling a friend you didn't like the restaurant they picked, admitting you haven't read the book everyone's discussing. Then move up. Tell your manager the deadline is unrealistic instead of quietly absorbing the overtime. Tell your partner what actually annoyed you about last night instead of saying you're just tired. Each one is a small deposit back into a voice you've been overdrawn on for years. Third, and this is the one that costs you something real, audit every close relationship by what it would actually survive. Ask coldly of every person near you, would this survive me having a boundary? Would it survive one real no? If the honest answer is no, you were never building a relationship. You were managing a hostage negotiation, and you were the hostage the entire time. Cut the transactions that were dressed up as friendships. Keep only the ones strong enough to hold your full, undiluted weight, not just your compliance. This will feel, at first, like cruelty. It isn't. Cruelty is punishing someone for who they are. This is simply refusing to keep funding a dynamic that was never sustainable in the first place. Some relationships were built entirely on your compliance, the way some businesses are built entirely on underpaying their employees. Profitable until the person doing the absorbing stops absorbing. Do these three things in this order, and something will happen that terrifies most people the first time it happens. You will start losing relationships. Let them go without ceremony. The ones that leave were never bonded to you in the first place. They were bonded to your usefulness, and usefulness was never a person. Expect resistance, and expect it first from the people closest to you. They benefited from the old version of you, the compliant one, the convenient one, and they will not thank you for retiring that version of you. Some will call the new boundary cold. Some will say you're not yourself anymore. Let them say it. That reaction isn't evidence you've gone too far. It's evidence you've finally started collecting on a debt they've owed you for years. Hold the line anyway. The version of you that used to fold first is not coming back to save this relationship because that version of you was never the one keeping it alive. The real test of any relationship was never how well it survived your compliance. It's how well it survives your honesty. Most will surprise you. The few that don't were never going to last regardless. You just would have found out later, after paying a much higher price to learn it. There is a version of you that doesn't flinch the moment someone might be upset, that says no without bolting an apology onto it like a warning label. That is kind, not because it fears the alternative, but because it could go the other way and chooses not to. That's not the absence of danger. That's danger disciplined into peace. This is the only kind of nice worth having, the kind that could dismantle the room and doesn't. Everything else, the appeasing, the shrinking, the endless reflexive yes, was never virtue. It was the sound of a cage closing, and for years you mistook the click of the lock for the feeling of home. Stop being harmless. Start being trusted with power. Those two things have never been the same, and only one of them was ever going to earn you the respect you've spent your whole life quietly starving for. The shadow was never your enemy. It was the only part of you that was ever telling the truth. None of this makes you invincible. It makes you honest, which is a different, harder thing to be. You will still feel the old pull to smooth things over, to apologize for taking up space, to hand out a yes before you've even considered whether you mean it. The difference now is that you'll notice it happening, in real time, instead of finding out 3 years later while you're exhausted and nobody in your life actually knows you. That noticing is the whole game. Everything after that is just practice. There is no finish line here. No single day where you wake up fully integrated and never people please again. There's only the next moment where you're asked for something you don't want to give. And the choice, again, of whether to hand over a reflexive yes or a considered answer. Make that choice 1,000 times, badly at first, and eventually it stops being a choice at all. It becomes who you actually are instead of who you learn to perform. And the people around you will feel this shift the moment it happens, even when they can't name it, especially when they can't name it. Stop performing. Stop shrinking. Your cage is unlocked. Walk out or choose to rot in the dark. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you and you found answers to your questions, let me know in the comments. Subscribe and like the video. We'll be exploring the topic of dark psychology further.